So what'd you think about Ghostbusters?
It's awful.
Hi, I'm David,
I'm Steve.
and we just got done watching the re-release of Ghostbusters in our local movie theater. So what'd you think?
I've always been a huge fan of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
So,
You are a super nerd.
I wouldn't say I'm a super fan of Ghostbusters. Like, I can't recite every line from the movie.
You just have toys
I just
from
have
the movie.
I just have toys.
And you're 30.
But it's more to do with the fact that as a child growing up, I would always play Ghostbusters. And I had
like out in the neighborhood?
Yeah, but I had like those really stupid, they were made out of like cheap plastic and everything, and I always wanted, they didn't look anything like the props from the movie.
Mhm.
I don't know why they,
Yeah.
made these, I mean, it had like a regular like gun grip on it and everything, and so...
See, all I had was a plunger, and I just had to pretend it was. No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, I buy some of the toys, but I don't construct my own perfect screen accurate props or anything.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not that kind of
So
super
that's a
fan.
super nerd.
That's a super nerd.
Okay.
I'm just regular.
Well, I mean, I always liked Ghostbusters growing up too. I watched the cartoon. I watched both the movies, and I find it interesting watching it as an adult and thinking back and remembering my kid perspective of the movie, which obviously there are a lot of things that went over my head at the time that make this movie it's not a kid's movie,
No.
especially by today's standards. I mean, maybe at that time it was considered more of a kid's movie, but I think today there'd be a lot less parents who'd want their young kids to see that movie, given the sexual content and the language and
the cigarettes and alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an interesting trip back in time for me watching it 30 years later.
Mm. Well, you didn't watch it 30 years ago because we're both 30, so
That's
it came
true.
out the year we were born.
Yes.
I don't remember how old I was when I first saw it, but I must have seen it on VHS rental.
Right.
My parents never actually bought the VHS. I would just go to the rental store and rent it all the time.
Over and over and over
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
And
now you just watch it on Netflix and you don't have to pay every time.
Well, I have the Blu-ray now.
Oh.
But I've seen it so many times now. I don't really watch it that often anymore.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in several years, and so for me, it was it was a fun experience rediscovering it. There were a few things that I know I didn't notice it when I was a kid, but looking at it now, for example, the guy from the EPA, and there's this whole, the government is incompetent, and they're just there to get in the way of private enterprise, and so the EPA guy is portrayed as this mindless bureaucrat.
Yeah, he's a very cartoonish villain.
Right. And meanwhile, I'm thinking now with my adult, brain, I think it's not a bad idea that the government's looking on these guys who are making portable nuclear devices and, creating things in their basement that can apparently blow up New York.
Yeah, it always... so Mr. Pecker tells that guy to turn the power off to the containment unit.
Yeah.
It's like simply turning the power off causes all the ghosts to be released in a massive explosion. What happens if they just have a power outage?
There's a blackout, yeah.
What were they prepared for that kind of event?
Yeah, I think they warranted some oversight.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And there were definitely some sexual references that when I was a kid, I'm sure I just smiled through and didn't understand.
Yeah, there were a lot of sexual references.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite probably is, with Dan Aykroyd having that dream of of being pleasured by the ghost.
Yeah. Which I always remember, I have vague recollections of that as a kid, not understanding what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not, I don't think it wasn't one of those movies that was made with kids as the main demographic. It was an adult movie that appealed to kids, much the same way I kind of think like the Avengers today is, where it's made for, you know, a teen to adult audience, but little kids are going to those movies in droves too, and growing up with that. How do you think the movie holds up today?
I think, compared to other movies from the time, it holds up pretty well. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of movies from the 1980s that, especially the early 80s, that I can go back now and watch every year or two and still enjoy it. I think that, the humor stands up, and even the graphics, obviously it's not, Lord of the Rings style, realism, but they're pretty good for the time. And, I don't find myself thinking the whole time, oh, this is just so cheesy, like you do sometimes with older movie special effects.
Yeah, I don't think it holds up quite as well as, like, say, E.T.,
Right.
which came out right around the same time.
Yeah. E.T. it's not really a movie about an alien. It's it's an emotional movie. I mean, Ghostbusters is a fun movie that's about catching ghosts.
Yeah, pretty much. It's got a romance subplot.
Right. But I could personally,
pretty,
I could care less whether or not Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray hooked up or not.
right.
It didn't matter to me at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think the special effects for the ghosts look great because those were practical. All the practical effects looked really good. The dogs, when they were practical, looked good.
The claymation.
When they were claymation,
Yeah.
that's when it showed its age more.
Right. I don't know about you, but I feel like drinking some of that Slimer High C after watching that movie.
Oh my god, I used to drink that all the time, and it was really gross. And I only drank it because it had Slimer on it. So
yeah, I'm sure we both are going to have all sorts of green dye-induced cancer any day now.
it's amazing that 30 years on, that people are still buying things that say Ghostbusters on it.
Yeah, and even, kids today who maybe have never even seen Ghostbusters, never even seen the Ghostbusters cartoon, they know what Ghostbusters is. They know the song.
Yeah. The song is definitely, I think, a huge part of why it's so ingrained in pulp culture too.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't for that song, if they didn't have that catchy tune,
yeah, who you gonna call? Everybody knows how to finish that.
Who are you gonna call? There was a great scene in one of the later seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't know if did you watch
No,
Buffy?
I never watched Buffy.
Oh, well, one of the characters asks Buffy, he's like, who are you going to call? And she looks at him and he's like, we'll never be able to say that again.
Yeah. In general, I kind of like the whole concept of re-releasing older great movies in the theater for people to enjoy. I think they can overdo it. There are a lot of movies that I don't really think need to be seen in
Forrest
IMAX.
Gump in IMAX.
Yeah.
Coming to a theater near you.
I don't think that's necessary. There are some genres of movie that are just, just because of the action or the sci-fi nature of it and the visual effects, they just lend themselves better to being seen on a really large screen.
I agree.
I don't think a story like Forrest Gump is anything that anything is added to it by watching it in IMAX.
I agree.
Well, I'm spent on Ghostbusters. What do you got?
I don't feel like we said that much.
Yeah, we did.
We went off track.
It's not that profound a movie. So who is Jesus in this story?
Bill Murray.
Oh, okay. He's always Jesus.
He's always Jesus. Yeah. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it for Ghostbusters.
You can do better than that. A little more energy.
Okay. Well, that's all we have to say about Ghostbusters.
We'll be back again next week to talk about something.
to talk about the next episode of Doctor Who.
Exactly. Robots of Sherwood.
Or Robot.
Something about a robot, Sherwood.
Yeah, Robin Hood's in it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm hoping to be impressed, but not expecting too much.
Yeah, the previews looked a little hinky.
Yeah. You can go on to the next movie in your queue now. We're done.
click something
Yeah.
over here.
You've stopped watching by now anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to anybody but myself.
Isn't this how Ferris Bueller ended?
I don't remember. But they should re-release it.
No, after the credits roll, he comes out and he's like, "What are you still doing here? Go home."
They had post-credit scenes in the 80s?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not a new thing.
Give me my crunch bar.
No, you haven't earned
I've earned it.
No.